I'm a 26-year-old girl with 3 scars down my back, and here's why. My mother and I have been on our own since my father passed away when I was 12. After he passed, my mother couldn't afford our house on her own, so we ended up having to move into the basement of another family's house for a few months. Now, it's important to know that during the first month, everything was normal. Well, as normal as it could be for a mother and her child living in someone else's basement, but anyway, we slept on a mattress on the floor for a long time before my mother could scrape together enough money for a bed frame. I remember when she first set it up, too. It was beautiful. It was light brown and smoothly carved. My mom said she got it from a garage sale for cheap. Looking at it, you could tell it was handcrafted and should have cost several $100s at least, but she said the owners parted with it for only a measly $57. The couple that we were renting the basement from helped us set it up. When I first saw it, I was so happy that I didn't mention the cost to my mother at all. I was just glad that I knew I wasn't going to be sleeping on the floor anymore. And the first few nights sleeping on it was okay. The frame was slightly off center, so I had a tendency to roll from one side or the other, but otherwise, it was fine. It wasn't until 4 days after we got it that things began to get weird. My mother had to work late that night. She had 2 jobs, one as a secretary in the day and another as a waitress on the weekends at the local pub. I happened to be alone in the house that night, as the couple upstairs had gone out for a date. I enjoyed the nights I had to myself because it meant that I had complete access to the TV as well as the fridge. I was sitting on the bed watching a Teen Titans marathon, and everything seemed normal. It was about the 3rd or 4th episode into the marathon that I swear I felt my bed move. And not like a normal move, it almost felt like it was vibrating. I didn't pay any attention to it and continued watching TV. But a few minutes later, it happened again, more violently this time. I muted the TV and looked around the basement. I didn't see anything, so I just continued watching TV. A few more hours passed. I must have fallen asleep because when I woke up, the TV was showing something that I don't recall but looked more adult than Teen Titans. I lay there for a moment like most people do, trying to realize I had just woken up, and it happened again. My bed vibrated, and this time I knew it was real and I felt it a lot stronger than earlier. I called out for my mother, but she wasn't home yet. And I didn't know what time it was, but it was so dark that I figured the couple we were renting from were somewhere upstairs. I started to get up from the bed to find them, to ask them if maybe I could sleep on the couch until my mother got home, but when I did, the bed began shaking even harder. So hard that you could hear the wooden posts as they rattled. I couldn't get off the bed either. It was shaking so hard that I was rolling around on it and couldn't manage to swing my legs over the side. I started screaming for my mother as the bed continued to shake. And then I felt this incredible pain down my backside. It was hot, almost like someone heated up a knife and was digging it in my back. I screamed louder, out of fear or pain, I'm not really sure. I then heard a bunch of footsteps from above. The basement light flickered on, and I saw Miss Johnson, our landlady, come down the stairs. She raced over to me and grabbed me by my shoulders and began shaking me, yelling at me to wake up. I stopped flailing around and screaming, realizing the bed was no longer vibrating. I wrapped my arms around her neck, saying something was under the bed. She told me I was too old to believe in monsters, but I swore to her the bed was shaking. She looked at me for a moment, but agreed to look under the bed. But she didn't find anything. I told her about the pain on my back. Mrs. Johnson looked like she didn't believe me, but said she'd tell my mother when she got home, as she didn't feel comfortable inspecting me without her there. I ended up sleeping on the couch that night upstairs. When I saw my mother in the morning, Mrs. Johnson had already told her what happened. My mother, who was much more tender than Mrs. Johnson ever was, asked to see my back. And there, down the middle, were 3 scratches. I don't know what they looked like. I just remember my mother telling me they were there and demanding to know what happened, who hurt me, and asking if it was Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. I told her it was the bed and began recounting how it shook like an earthquake. She shook her head and got really angry at me. She told me that this was not a time to joke, but I swore to her I wasn't. I was running late for school, so she didn't finish yelling at me. She put some ointment on my back before getting me dressed and sending me off. And when I got home, she only asked how my back felt, but she didn't want to hear about the bed shaking. I refused to sleep in the bed that night, or for any other night, for that matter. But then something strange happened. I had spent the night at a friend's house a few days later, even though it was the middle of the week, as we had a class project to work on. And when I came home after school that day, I saw the bed frame out on the curb. When I walked through the front door, I saw my mom still in her pajamas and sipping on a cup of hot tea, indicating that she didn't go to work that day. I asked her what was wrong and why the bed was outside. She refused to answer me. Instead, she just told me to change out of my school clothes and get ready for dinner. To this day, my mom won't tell me why she threw that bed frame out. We had moved out of that basement a year later when my mother met her boyfriend and moved in with him. And ever since then, anytime I brought it up, she abruptly changes the subject or finds a reason to excuse herself from the conversation. But personally, I think she found out that night that I was right, and she found out the hard way.